Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Mad Palace podcast, where we discuss stories, books, and writing. For today's episode, we're going to be discussing tropes. The Mad Palace is a group of writers with backgrounds, locations, genres, and preferences that are scattered to the four winds. Guests of the Mad Palace range from writers of web-based fiction, self-published novelists, to traditionally pubbed authors. My name is J.A. Waters, author of web-based serials Valencia and Oceans of Shelter. We'll start with a brief introduction from everyone visiting today's Mad Palace. Please go ahead and we'll get rolling.
I'm Aden. I'm the author of the Chronicles of Terror web serial novels and adventure fantasy.
I'm Jennifer Flath, author of the Black Pearl series, young adult fantasy, Wattpad-ish, and Amazon.
Great, thank you. Thank you, everyone, and thank you for joining us today on Mad Palace. Today we're going to be talking about tropes, as I said. We're going to kind of hopefully go over what they are, how they're used in fiction, and maybe we'll discuss a couple of our favorites as well. So just to go right into the questions, I'm going to randomly choose you, Aden. With any other tool or element of writing, tropes have their supporters and their antagonists, the people against the use of tropes. Which one are you?
I would fall more on the side of those who use tropes, but in a more self-deprecating way. Like when I do write about tropes or anything that I think is a trope, I usually make fun of it in my writings.
I'm so with you. If a character can make fun of something, you can get away with it. Just
Right.
period.
Like
I'm with you.
like if I use a Deus Ex Machina, sometimes I'll just have the character say, "Oh look, what a Deus Ex Machina just happened to me."
So
And
you both do some kind of subversion of the trope, I think is the popular word to use these days.
Oh, it
I don't,
depends. Sometimes
I
I
don't
just use the trope.
I don't think subversion is really a popular word these days.
I don't know, maybe in the right circles, subversion. I don't know. But no.
I'm down with it.
So when you say, for instance, you say that you use them in a way and then have your characters make fun of them, what is the purpose of that? Is it to or to kind of nod and wink at the reader so that they know that you know that you're doing that?
I think it's more of like times have shifted and the idea of stories has expanded a lot. So we have a lot of tropes. We have a website basically dedicated to tropes right now. And when you think about it, all stories are is just a bunch of tropes mixed into together. It's really hard to create something new. Um, and it's just my way of nodding as a nod to how these tropes, to me at least, are like a building block for telling stories.
Yeah, I agree with you there. It feels like maybe back in the day there used to be a lot of sort of common ground with what we saw and read, and we as if I was alive 100 years ago, because I'm
Maybe you
talking
were.
pre. It's, I don't give away my secrets. Um, but now with the internet, everything's so searchable, and there are so many uh, little genres that cult things and groups that are pretty big around certain topics or books or obscure things that go viral. And so there's lots of little pieces of pop culture, and I think that, like Aiden was saying, we're so much more aware of the tropes, and everything kind of has been done in one way or another. So especially as a writer, I feel like if you've seen something done before, it feels like a trope. So we may have a really skewed perception of probably other people. Maybe they have their top 10 that they really see as tropes. Um, maybe we have a bigger range of things that we see as tropes because we are looking harder.
So you think perhaps as writers that we have a problem with getting too close to the material, so we think of everything all the time, and so obviously we get that preconception that everyone else does as well.
Yeah. You know what's funny is that I know, I mean, I guess I'll throw myself under the bus, but I'm sure you guys have been there too, where you're really inspired by something in particular and you're kind of worried that someone's going to call you out on it, but then they end up comparing it to something completely different that either you are not familiar with or you absolutely do not think you were not thinking of when you wrote this thing, and nobody notices that it's what you feel is an exact copy for a character you loved or a show you watched or something, and nobody sees that parallel, but they see something else that you weren't intending.
That happens quite a lot.
Have you had any specific instances of that, Aden, where like someone was like, "Hey, you stole this from somebody," and you're like, "No, that's not what I meant at all."
Oh no, I'm not Ryan.
I know, I wish Ryan was here.
Barbie.
Right.
Not even I have had my work compared to Barbie.
Yes. Whoever thought he stole his fairy tale stories from Barbie? That's just amazing.
It's one of those aspirations we can all hold in our heart and hope that one day we will achieve that goal.
No, for me, it's generally my stuff has been quite received in the way that I thought they would. Like one of my main characters, the Watcher, has often been compared to Doctor Who, and that was a great part of the inspiration for the character. So I'm quite happy with that. But at the same time, outside of character, story-wise, there have been times where the story has been compared to other things that I'm not that particularly didn't inspire me or I've never heard of, and I think that's fine too. It just means it's close to people's heart enough that they can remember them in a certain way. But it just shows that no matter how much you write, something will have been done somewhere else before.
Of course, and I think, as you said, as information is easier and easier to get, we all get more informed a little bit, and that base level of understanding of writing and ideas in general, I think that keeps going up as information flows better. But specifically in the case of tropes, are there any that you use in particular for that reason, to remind people of certain things?
I do try to avoid tropes that bother me, and I guess the ones that bother me are stereotypes. If you feel like you're creating a character that's just a surface level stereotype, that I guess that is a trope that does bother me. So I think I just answered the opposite of whatever your question was.
So no, if the question is how do you try to use tropes in a particular way?
I try to use them. So I guess I try to use them sometimes as, what is the stereotype of this character, and what would be more fun? Like, what could this character? So you take this stereotype, but let's add something to that to just wreck it, to make it, sort of turn it on its head, maybe.
See, this is where I would use the word subversion, but
Yes.
that's not a
I'm
popular
with
word,
you.
I guess.
I'm good with it. I don't know where Aiden's going with that one.
No, no. So you actually bring up a great point, and this is a question, obviously, for both of you. But you say there are some tropes that you. It seems like you instantly just go, no, I'm not going to use that, or if I am going to use it, I'm going to change it so that it's either opposite or different. So, what are those tropes? What are those favorite tropes? Are those least favorite tropes?
For me, my favorite common thing to do that I like to turn it on its head is killing off the main characters. It's kind of sick, I guess. But when you're really comfortable with a character, you always assume that that character will stay, and I like to turn that around in the sense that um, once I feel there's a point in the story that's comfortable, and yet I feel there's a need for the character to go, that character might just die.
So, I think.
So it's very Game of Thrones-ish, which I guess right. Yeah, see, now that Game of Thrones has done this killing off major character every day thing, it's kind of a trope itself now.
Right? I know.
So yeah,
It
so it went
created its
from
own trope for itself.
by
What? I
by
mean,
by
how did
trying
it?
to
Yeah.
subvert a trope.
I
Yeah,
mean,
I feel like everybody now expects all the characters to die. So, do they even have any impact anymore? I don't know.
I felt like my story was more impactful maybe 5 years ago, and then Game of Thrones did the thing where everyone died, and suddenly when I kill off a character, it's just, oh, you're copying Game of Thrones.
oh no.
It's like,
That always happens, though,
yeah,
doesn't it? Everything.
yeah.
Yeah. But what about you, Jen? Do you have any favorites or least favorite tropes?
Um, so we probably are talking like the 5 to 10 years ago. I don't even know how to express this. So the idea of that really stereotypical strong female character that was basically just a really sexy man. That that trope really drove me nuts, and it was it's actually, I think it's better, but there was a good chunk of time, and we're talking longer ago, I think late 90s, 2000s, where that was so prevalent.
Would you call it the
Um,
Buffy period, maybe?
oh, maybe, except she was fabulous, and then there were a lot of, I guess it just depends how deep the characters were, but oh man, sure, yeah,
No, no.
that's
I think there's like the pale
definitely,
imitators, right?
yeah, for sure. Um, anyway, so I what do I do with that? I like to either put that character in as sort of the, I don't know, sort of what it looks like to me, either very destructive or um I don't know,
John Smash.
where am I going with this?
Are you, are you
Uh
are you maybe talking about taking a trope to its logical conclusion? Like it seems like a lot of times, at least to
Sometimes
me,
I'll do that. Yep, yeah.
just it seems like to me that maybe a lot of tropes they take something and they take it only at the shallowest level and they don't actually follow it to its logical conclusion. They don't go, okay, if they were like this, that would mean that this and this and this would have to happen.
Absolutely. Yes. I love that. Big
I mean that.
picture.
I mean that's fine if you're doing like a comedic story. You can just poke fun at the shallowness of your own shallowness.
Oh, but well, sometimes it's the opposite of, though. You go deeper with that character instead of having the shallow, um, instead of having the shallow character.
Right. So it's like you're showing so-called stereotype, but then you can, dig deep and try to make that stereotype unique.
Yeah, I feel like that's almost a trope in itself now because they've done it so much with the villains of stories. Like you were saying before, the wicked treatment of something, they'll take the villain and give them a backstory. And so I feel like whereas before, that was a different kind of trope where a villain would need very little reasoning to be doing what they were doing. They were just the bad guy. And there were a couple different bad guy motivations they might have. Now it's almost a trope in itself to give them the big backstory and the reason for doing what they're doing, and are they really the bad guy? And
Yeah, I mean,
it's its own trope now.
I would say that's definitely a trope now. I actually watched a pretty interesting video essay on this by Lindsay Ellis. I don't know if you know of her. She does a lot of work on YouTube, and she actually asked the question: Are Disney villains going extinct? And a lot of the discussion was basically on tropes in a roundabout way, and that's kind of leading to my next question: Do tropes Is this just like a cyclical thing where they eventually will be popular again or usable again, or will they eventually get to a point where they just go extinct?
It just comes and goes with the time. Like like the big bad, the big bad without a backstory and the big bad with a backstory. I feel like it's been cycling around for it's coming back to a bad guy without motivations. As the past few decades, it's a bad guy with motivations. It's slowly coming back where people want a simpler bad guy. The first media that comes to mind is Kingsman. They made fun of how the modern bad guys require a lot of backstories, and how they prefer a time when it was simpler, where they could just have a Doctor Evil like character and just goes, well, ha 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 ha.
So
I went to destroy the world.
So they almost made it a real world subversion. In their quote unquote real world, they basically said bad guys used to be simpler and now they're more complex. Not just blaming it on the writers.
I think it's gotten to the point where it's just it's gotten so popular to be a bad guy with or without a backstory that both of them are tropes in their own sense, in a way that they are both common enough that they are considered normal. So I feel like after a while, the new things become the new normal, and the normal things becomes the old uniqueness. But with our modern access to information, the uniqueness doesn't disappear, and you just keep having it forever.
Ooh, yeah, I'm with you. That's, right. I mean, when you said, are tropes just going to disappear? We're to the point where, no, I mean, they can't. They have to cycle in and out, but yeah, we just keep adding to the list of what's known.
Right, like I think
what
now
you expect to happen.
Yeah, like now with the era of the internet, I think tropes will just keep getting added, and it's either new things or recycling the old ones, but we won't be removing any kind of story element as we did in the past, I think.
So Joe has been throwing out the questions and not answering them. Do you have a trope that you either love or use or hate? You can answer any one of them or all three.
So having to actually answer the questions, now I have to think of what my answers would be. I see what you did here. You flipped that coin.
I think she's just trying to be lazy and not answer any more questions, Paul.
No.
I'm not saying it's not a good move, but that's a great move.
And obviously I'm delayed.
I'm curious. I'm genuinely curious. You could do the beauty pageant style technique. The way I feel about tropes is that there are a lot of tropes out there.
And
And
when I
it's a
think,
very interesting topic to discuss.
no, so offhand, and so the cool thing about something like TV tropes is you go and you can actually find like names that people have made up for some of these ideas. But I don't
Some of
actually.
those make me so mad.
Yes, don't they? Thank you. So
I had to look up Manic Pixie Dream Girl the other day, and I was like, I'm mad now. I shouldn't have. I shouldn't have. I'm
wait,
just angry.
are you mad because of the name or because of what it represents?
Oh, it's one of those female tropes that makes me, I mean, don't even say like Mary Sue around me or I'll no. But things that are just character types that a character type is not really a trope, even though that's exactly what I brought up as a trope. A character type is as deep as you make it. I mean,
Subverting.
So I mean, and this is totally on me because I meant to segue into how do we define tropes, and so this is a great time to bring it up at the tail end of this conversation. Is what are tropes? Like it seems like we like
I think you
said
just
that's not a trope.
let me distract myself into not making you answer the question.
Hey, you're not supposed to catch on. So no, I like what I was getting at though is by saying TV tropes, for instance, has a ton of labels assigned to things, but I don't
Yes,
know
sorry.
the labels, right? I don't know
Yeah,
if I start
neither.
describing a trope, someone out there would go, "Oh, you mean blah blah blah," and I'm like, "Okay, sure," but so I love the idea, and I'm not entirely sure if it's a trope, but I love the idea of a long and not necessarily romantic, but romantic in the sense of the adventure, not necessarily in the sense of two people finding each other, but a long romantic adventure where something has this air of it's kind of epicness, but
Yeah, but
it's this long journey where the journey is important, but also the destination is almost equally important. And I don't know if that's a trope or if that's just a story
a
type.
style.
Yeah,
Yeah.
maybe. I don't know, but
Hmm.
other than
I
that,
mean,
I can't think of anything that I really
I mean, it
aspire to use.
used to be like a cliche, isn't it?
So that's the problem, right? Is like there's cliches, there's tropes, there's memes, there's stereotypes, and they all are fairly similar words, right?
Yeah.
Right. I would think that a trope is more like a when you use it in writing for anything like script writing or book writing, basically any kind of literative work. That's when you use a trope. Like we don't go outside and say, "Oh, that's so." We say, "Oh, that's so cliche." We don't say, "Oh, that's so trope." When we're in the real world.
Well, maybe you don't.
Yeah.
Wow, I don't know about you.
Man, traffic. What a trope.
That's the thing though. I mean, it's exactly like Aden is saying, like in a literary device sort of manner. If, for instance, a sitcom that takes place in New York always has to have like certain things, and those are kind of tropes. Like they always have the cool apartment, or they always have that bar that they hang out with, and they always complain about traffic, and they always complain about not being able to get a taxi, even though as soon as they need one for the plot, they get a taxi. So I mean, those are realistic, but they're also tropes.
Yeah.
They're almost
I've
like
never been to
markers,
New York,
right?
so
They're like these
Yeah.
little labels that we use as writers and go, hey, I need to effectively communicate that they're in New York in the shortest amount of time as
Yeah,
possible.
right? I don't think I have real solid definitions for any of these things, but I do know that cliches and stereotypes I try to either avoid or do the Aiden thing where I'll highlight it to point out that I'm doing it on purpose or that it's funny. Because sometimes, you know, you need to tell people when things are funny. So cliches and stereotypes generally bad, and they annoy me, and I will either try to avoid them or sort of circumvent them, or and tropes I use. I mean, they're just a part of life. Everything is kind of a trope.
So is there a way to perhaps ensure that tropes will not ruin the story? I mean, I don't think you can really just automatically, oh, you use that trope, I'm done. But are there ways to ensure that a trope is used well?
I think there are just two tropes that you should never ever go full into. The Mary Sue and the Gary Stu tropes.
Oh, don't even start me with the Mary Sue. I will fight you.
So stay tuned, everyone that's listening. We're going to have a fight after this.
Ding, ding, ding.
I mean, like, you can use them well if you know what you're doing. If you're purposely going into it for an artistic reason, I mean, that will, you know, like a character that, I don't know if you guys read this manga called One Punch Man.
Mm-hmm.
The character basically is so powerful that he defeats everything with one punch, and he can't get any joy and excitement from fighting because he's so strong. And the story centers around him being a invincible character, so that makes sense to have a Gary Stu of a character. But to have it in any other context where you're just putting it there for the reason of having an invisible character that you can put your shoes in, that destroys a story, I feel. Those are the two tropes that I never ever try to touch without an understanding.
Yeah, but like the Superman character is iconic. You should, I mean, if that's what the story is and it's done well and the character is deeper than that, then it's just a character that your story can use, or a story that can use that character.
So I guess the takeaway I'm getting is that any trope, and in this particular case we're talking about Gary Stu's, but really it sounds more like we're talking about the difference between a shallow character that isn't well defined and a character that maybe has some excellence in a bunch of fields, or they're just an all-around good, like, strong individual, but they have depth to them. So the difference is, you know, well-defined character versus non-well-defined character, which leads me to believe that almost any trope, in this case Gary Stu, can be used well if you use the trope correctly.
That's what I would say.
Because that's what I would say too if I had thought of it.
No, like the examples from Jin, Superman, and from Aden, One Punch Man, is, you know, this basically a supreme being that has ultimate power to do almost anything, and yet how do they make them interesting? With One Punch Man, they make the story about his struggle to find enjoyment out of a life when he's all powerful. With Superman, you often see that story done in such a way that Superman is seen as he's trying to still maintain his humanity despite his alienness.
And I'm down with it's maybe it's coming back into vogue, but I mean, I'm down with nobility and big, you know, big ideals as sort of, I don't know, what the story is striving to be about, versus like Game of Thrones and everybody's
a terrible person.
Yeah, right.
I like
that
how
was very much in vogue for a while.
I like how you started out your sentence with, I can be down with nobility. Like, you're like, if I have to.
If I have to.
Like, I normally wouldn't, but just this one time. So we're nearing the end of our time for this particular episode. But are there any other thoughts or ideas or just general questions we want to address about tropes?
Did you ever answer my question? Yeah, you did. Okay. You answered one of them halfway, I think.
Well, see, that's the problem is since tropes are this kind of literary device, like for instance, let's take Gary Stu. I do like Gary Stu's Mary Sue's. I like the idea of them because it's kind of a ridiculous concept, and I think that to me, at least, what I get from you is that's why it probably angers you when people overuse it.
Right.
Because to me, it seems like a lot of people would just go, "Oh, that's a good character. They're competent. That's a competent human being. What a Mary Sue, right?" And that's dumb because people can be competent.
Well, I don't think it's just competent. I think it's more like an almost invulnerability to the
Yeah.
to anything bad. that happens to them.
People will use it though to describe basically any character they don't like. Like most recently, Katniss from Hunger Games was described as a Mary Sue, and that just makes me want to punch people in the face.
Right.
That's not. I
Right.
mean, she has like one skill, and she's a terrible person. Like she's a terrible person who just happens to love her sister in a way that's almost as self-centered as, but she's fabulous. I mean, she's an amazing character. And the fact that she is able, like, survival is her one thing. Like, that's her thing. She's
Right,
not great
that's-
at everything, and she's not
terrible at
this, like,
everything else.
moral paragon. Anyway, so I feel like people throw around those terms just to bash characters that they don't like or don't want to like.
And I agree, and that's why where I was going with that, I like Mary Sue's and Gary Stu's, even if it's just like an exploration of, hey, let's take an all powerful character and throw them in some weird situation. But like you're saying, I don't think most characters that are labeled as Mary Sue's actually are. Especially if you start taking into account what the backstory is that maybe the writer didn't have time to put into the story, or on film you get characters like Indiana Jones where he may be a Gary Stu if you only look at these surface level things, but there's a lot of backstory there that maybe he's not. I mean, all
Right,
the
it's like
the weird
that-
super masculinity things that go with that, but that's a different trope.
I think it's as long as you don't go the route where they can survive anything. There's an explosion on the plane crashes, but somehow this one person that is good at everything survives it, even though everyone else is dead. Yeah, that gets on my nerve. Like
So,
I would watch movie and people are dying out. Like he's
but
dead.
is that a Gary Stu trope, or is that a plot contrivance where they just said, never mind, don't worry about it,
think
we're just gonna hand wave that?
It's like a plot contrivance born out of a Gary Stu. Like when I see John McClain thrown out of a window and he lands on glass, and I'm like, yeah, he's dead. He shouldn't be walking. You know, he should at the very minimum be in bed for like 8 months, and that gets to me quite a bit.
Yeah, wouldn't
No, I'm sorry, he's dead. He's gone. He's done.
but
Stop it. There should not be a second Die Hard. This is over.
but that's a genre, that's a genre element, right?
It happens almost everywhere. I was just like, no, Bella, she jumped off the cliff. She's dead. She's not alive. That's it. No more Twilight, please.
So maybe one of our next discussions need to be on effective use of realism in a story.
Maybe. I mean, I'm gonna be like
Or-
Jen if we're going.
Or we should just have Aden make a list of things that bother him and just go through it.
So our next episode will just be an Aden rant, Aden,
Yeah.
I need you to
Number one, Die Hard. Why?
It's just gonna be 5 minutes, 5 solid minutes. He's not gonna even breathe.
We don't even need to be there. Number two. Wait, I've got nothing.
Just
This is where I pull out that line that I've forgotten again. Oh no! Wait, wait, guys, help me out.
Line?
You can't do that, Aden. No, it would have been funny. It would have been funny. What is the line? What is the hell's line?
I'm afraid.
I'm afraid I can't do that, Dave.
Yes, except I would have said it, and it would have been Aden, and it would have been funny. This podcast is over. We're done.
That's actually a good time to go ahead and close this out. Once again, we were talking about tropes today, and hopefully we had some kind of coherent thought somewhere in what we said. If not, then maybe next week or next time. So,
It's fine, we're living up to our name.
as I said before, my name is J.A. Waters. I'm the author of web-based serials such as Lincia and Oceans of Shelter. You can find me on Twitter at J.A. Waters Author.
I'm Aden Ng, author of the Chronicles of Terra web serial novels, and you can find me on Twitter at Aden_Ng. That's Ng spelled NG.
I am Jennifer Flath, author of the Black Pearl series, young adult fantasy. Find pieces of it over at Wattpad or Amazon. I'm on Twitter as @Jen with 2 N's Snork. And on Facebook, good luck. I think it's Black Pearl series.
Good luck.
Good luck. Maybe you can use Twitter to get there. I don't know.
And you can find all of us and a list of our stories at fishclimbingtrees.com. Thank you again for joining us here at the Mad Palace, and thank you to Aden and Jen for discussing tropes with us today. Cut.
Cut.
I mean, I'm still recording, but you know, that's the
Sure.
thing.
In case Aden and I have a fist fight.
Yeah, we gotta record the fist fight. I'll do the thing in the corner, like, and in the left corner we have Aden weighing internet points.
Yeah, I won that though. I gave myself like a few trillion points or something.
Oh, that's right. You did the rock paper. I win.
That sounds like a game I'd be great at. Would it be the day before? No, I'm earlier. I get so confused. How can things be happening at the same time but happening earlier? And I can't. Because you just adjust. If stores were open from whatever 3 a.m. to 10 a.m. was, that would just be normal to you.
Just give it time for the robot revolution, and everything will be open all the time.